A number of media outlets have been reporting smears on Cenk Uygur, who is, of course, a candidate for California's 25th district. Now, Cenk is not on the show today. He's not even in the studio or in the building today. And even though we are allowed to talk about that race or cover that race as if it's any other race in the country, I've shied away from talking about it on this show. We do editorial content here. We share opinion and analysis. We're not strict news. However, I just wanted to kind of keep away from covering that race in order to keep my own personal biases out of the story. However, we're now put in this position where we literally have no choice but to respond to the smears that are being put out there by the establishment, plain and simple. They are going through 13 years of video that TYT has produced. They're cherry picking and taking things out of context in order to make it appear as though Cenk is supportive of all sorts of disgusting and egregious things. Now, of course, he had his blogs from nearly 20 years ago, which he has already addressed over and over again. He's apologized for them. He wrote them at a different time in his life. However, one of the smears is so egregious that we had to talk about it on the show and debunk it. So it actually comes in the form of a New York Times article that was written by a reporter named Jennifer Medina. And so I want to show you the headline of the piece. It was in response to Bernie Sanders unendorsing Cenk. Bernie Sanders retracts endorsement of Cenk Uygur after criticism. And again, Jennifer Medina wrote this piece. And so in it, there's an excerpt that reads, quote, "In one clip that circulated on Twitter, David Duke ends an interview by saying, 'I am not what you call a racist,' to which Uygur replies, 'No, of course not.'" Now, when Cenk said no, of course not, if you watch the full video, if you watch just that snippet of the video, it is abundantly clear that he's being dismissive and sarcastic toward David Duke. If you watch the entirety of that interview, you will see that he goes after David Duke pretty aggressively. In fact, we're gonna show you a clip of that in just a minute. But this is how far Christy Smith, the establishment media, and the Democratic establishment will go to smear Cenk, plain and simple. Now, has he made mistakes in his commentary in the past? Absolutely. Was he wrong in writing an op-ed when he was in college claiming that the Armenian genocide was not a genocide? Yes, we've talked about that on this show. We've debated this on the show. I have been able to speak out against that aggressively, both on this show and behind the scenes. And he not only rejects that op-ed he wrote when he was a stupid college student, he has acknowledged the genocide on this very program over and over and over again, right? So we're gonna show you.
People conveniently forget.
Right, they don't conveniently forget, right? They're just bad faith actors and I'm sick of it. Because this isn't just about California's 25th district. This isn't about Cenk. This is about what we can and can't believe in reporting, right? So for me, this goes beyond TYT, it goes beyond Cenk. What can I trust from the New York Times if they brazenly publish this type of garbage, and then when there's a flood of people demanding a retraction and a correction, they refuse to do it? Jennifer Medina hasn't responded at all. The New York Times hasn't responded at all. They reported this as if Cenk is agreeing with David Duke in saying that he's not a bigot or he's not a racist. Let's show you what the interview actually looked like.
Name me one anti-Semitic person.
I say that
you can't.
The Jewish organized.
David, how can you think you're not anti-Semitic? How could you possibly think that? You think the Jews control the world? That's anti-Semitism 101.
I'll give you another quotation.
Kagan is on the Supreme Court, but so is Sotomayor, and she's definitely not Jewish. She's Latina. I mean, Kagan made it onto the Supreme Court, but so is Sotomayor. Those are two picks by Obama. Sotomayor, clearly not Jewish. In fact, what is it? What I think 7 out of the 9 justices are Catholic. Oh my God, the Catholics have taken over the Supreme Court. Watch out, David. Watch out, it's the Catholics that are the problem. But then you've got the Koch brothers who buy all these politicians. They're not Jewish. How does that fit into your conspiracy theory?
So,
I mean, you keep saying Goldman Sachs, but before Blankfein, the head of Goldman Sachs was Hank Paulson. Christian extraordinaire. The biggest political contributor in the country is not Sheldon Adelson. It is David and Charles Koch. They are enormously Christian. They're Christian. If you built everything, but somehow you don't have power anymore, you can't even get into the schools you built, why are you guys such losers?
Taking things out of context from decades of TYT content in an effort to smear Cenk, and it's disgusting that mainstream media outlets, including the New York Times, just take that at face value, print it, publish it, never correct it, right? Which shows you that there's malicious intent here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, so if I'm trying to play devil's advocate, it's either.
I don't know if right now is a good time to play devil's advocate. I have no patience for it. But go ahead.
Could you put down the pen, please, and the mug? Okay, so it's either malicious. This person watched the video, knows that it was sarcasm, but doesn't want you to know that, and so leaves it out, or complete laziness. Doesn't even watch the snippet of the video, let alone the full video, and just believes, because I've seen other things that he's said that I don't like, I will trust that anything you tell me he said is the way that you say he said it. But in either case, once it becomes immediately apparent that it's not an accurate portrayal, it doesn't matter if it's laziness or if it's malicious. You have to take it out. It's your obligation as a reporter for the New York Times more than any other outlet literally on the planet. They're supposed to have the highest standards. And so you can have a problem. Like I've talked with people that say, it doesn't matter if he was sarcastic, he had David Duke on, I don't want him to have David Duke on, which is fine. Write that in your article. But to say that he was agreeing with him that he's not racist was either initially malicious or lazy, but it doesn't matter because we know it's not accurate, and so how dare you not take it out of the article?
Well, because there's malicious intent. To me, that's what demonstrated that this isn't about reporting the facts, this isn't about telling the truth about what's happening in that district and what this race is about. Look, there's legitimate criticism regarding Cenk running and his position as a candidate, the fact that he doesn't live in the district, fine. People find that to be a problem. And so that is legitimate reporting. That is something that you can include in your article as a legitimate critique. But to go out of your way to smear him like this, to take videos where he's obviously making a joke. Like they're trying to paint him as someone who's like pro bestiality. I mean, the most egregious, ridiculous, pathetic smears you can imagine, they're just printing and they're taking it at face value from a Twitter troll. So let's get to the Twitter troll because I want to discuss this person.
I have general thoughts, but let's do the troll first.
Okay, so there is one person who is very dedicated in spending all of their time posting nonsense videos that are taken out of context, all of these smears that we're talking about. By the way, Tom Watson, who's not hiding his identity, he's a political strategist, a Democratic strategist, who is regurgitating a lot of this. In fact, he even went out of his way to make it appear as though I deny the Armenian genocide, which is disgusting, and it's very difficult to hold back from cursing on this show right now. Because that's my family, those are my ancestors, okay? To exploit them and pretend as if you care about the Armenian genocide to push your stupid political narrative and your stupid political agenda is so incredibly gross. And I'm so sick of it. I'm sick of it from the right, and I'm certainly sick of it from the left. Pretending as if you care about the genocide. You care about the genocide? Why weren't you lobbying to get it recognized in Congress? You weren't, right? Because you don't care. It's nothing more than your little political tactic. But one of these trolls is M. Mendoza Ferrer, right? Has changed the Twitter account several times. Oh, here's my new Twitter account. Now that I've sniped one political candidate I don't like, I'm gonna go ahead and use a new account to snipe another one. I have reason to believe that that's not a real person, okay? So we're looking into it because I wanna know, all right, is this like a paid political operative who is part of the Democratic establishment, trying to smear Cenk, trying to smear the Young Turks, trying to smear everything that we do here? I wanna know. And what's really interesting is, in response to one of our viewers also questioning the identity of this person, I said, it's not her real name. Already digging into this, they think we're stupid, okay? And what did she do? By the way, this person has blocked me, so I'm not able to respond to any of the smears that they post. None of them. I have no voice, right? Anyone who has actual evidence to provide a rebuttal to the smears that this person is putting out there, you're blocked, so you don't get an opportunity. But in response to that comment, this person wrote, if people could report Anna Kasparian's tweet below as targeted harassment, I would appreciate it. Oh, that's rich, that's rich. You wanna talk about targeted harassment? That's not targeted harassment. All these reporters are relying on this person's posts on Twitter to do their reporting, right? We're not allowed to know what your identity is?
Well, and the level it goes to is Jake Tapper just tweeted a thread to her thread.
Yeah.
So if she took like 6 seconds out of a video, removes the contents, removes the fact that it was sarcasm, Jake Tapper believes, I just trust her. It's fine. I don't need to go and find the videos myself. You can just trust this non-verified person that I didn't know up until earlier today. Run with that, that's fine.
And so you're exactly right. So if this is the source who is publicly posting smears on Cenk and the Young Turks, and the media is just taking it at face value, reprinting it, republishing it, regurgitating it, we don't have the right to know whether or not this person is a paid political operative.
Or is affiliated with the campaign.
Or affiliated with the campaign, exactly. But again, if they're affiliated with the campaign, political operative, we should know about it. So this Tom Watson guy, again, a Democratic strategist, wrote, here's Anna from TYT digging into the real identity of the person posting videos of Cenk's own words, out of context, by the way, right? And then he accuses me of ramping up to dox and expose. So this is what Democrats are about. Establishment Democrats, this is what they're about, right? By the way, that wasn't Tom Watson, but Tom Watson tweeted something similar.
Yeah.
That was someone who's also going after Cenk on Twitter.
And might like Pete Buttigieg.
And might like
seems.
Yeah, exactly.
Dox has a definition.
Doxing?
Yeah, it's exposing the personal information such that a person could go and find that person in the real world. It exposes someone to violence, possibly sexual or physical violence that could lead to them being killed. Simply identifying a name that goes along with a social media account, that is not doxing a person.
Yeah.
By the way, as people who have literally been doxed, we appreciate the distinction between these things.
Oh, but they don't care about us getting doxed.
Exactly.
Right? They don't care about doxing in general. They don't care about anyone getting doxed unless it's one of their own political operatives that they're trying to protect, right? Because it would look real bad if we find out that this person is actually associated with a campaign or is part of the DNC.
Or an industry or a lobby group or something.
That would be a real problem. So let's go ahead and try to intimidate Anna into accusing, by accusing her of trying to dox people. Yeah, let me just let you guys know something. Maybe you haven't watched the show much. I'm not easy to intimidate, okay?
I've tried.
Yeah, so.
And by the way, it's just a matter of time because over the past few days, this has been written about by the LA Times, Washington Post, New York Times, literally everyone, so many reporters, they're gonna wanna know who this person is.
So let's take a look at what Cenk has to say about the Armenian genocide because that's another smear that I'm seeing over and over again. Let's take a look.
Did I write things about that when I was younger? Yes, so that part is true. So I did deny it earlier. I wrote in a column when I was in college about that. And so obviously a long time ago. Well, what's my position? I think I've stated it clearly a number of times, but I'm gonna state it one more time here, okay? The Armenian genocide happened. It existed, it's true, okay? I don't know how I could be any clearer than that. So I know that some Turkish folks grew up believing in things that were taught to them, whether it was in Turkey or through other means. And I know because I lived that, right? I'm a Turkish American and I grew up believing the things that I was taught. Looking back on it, some of it is absolutely absurd. And there's Armenian genocide is an incredibly serious issue. And they were targeted because they were Armenians. Whatever excuse you want to make about why, they didn't target Norwegians. They didn't target other people. They targeted Armenians. They were driven out. They're not in Turkey now. And an enormous number died in massacres. It is a textbook definition of a genocide.
And that's just one example of Cenk talking about the Armenian genocide on this network, but it doesn't matter. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about the facts. They're going out of their way to smear him. And once Bernie Sanders endorsed Cenk, let's kill two birds with one stone.
Because it's not about Cenk at that point.
It's not about Cenk. And look, this is the thing, you guys, we're not living in a true democracy if you have the media serving as an extension of political agendas, as nothing more than an apparatus utilized by corrupt politicians. We just don't have a democracy, period. We just don't. And we certainly don't have true journalism in this country if we're gonna allow stuff like this to pass.
So I read a good number of the articles over the past few days, and the New York Times one really stands out as the one most willing to say something that they must have known was literally the opposite of the truth. The vast majority of the other articles, I mean, we expected there would be negative press. Obviously, Cenk knew that there would be negative press. He's a guy who has spoken more on camera than literally anyone else in the country, and he's never shied away from saying things that were then or are now controversial. The thing about the entire episode that I have found to be depressing is the media's dereliction of their duty in this particular case. Not that they're gonna cover the stuff that he said. Nobody thought that they were not going to do that sort of thing. Before the Sanders thing, after the Sanders thing, I mean, obviously that was gonna be a part of the race. But for any given Democratic congressional primary around the country, how many front page New York Times articles do you think will be written about it? None, probably. How many times will the LA Times write about a particular Democratic primary race, even in California? Maybe it'll get one. Washington Post, same thing. Politico, same thing. I don't know if there has been this cycle as much focus on one congressional primary on the Democratic side anywhere in the country. And yet, after days of reading article after article after article, I could not tell you anything substantive about either of the candidates. I don't know where Cenk stands on healthcare, income inequality, police brutality, climate change, anything.
By reading those articles.
By reading those articles. Obviously, I know because I'm here and I know him. Christy Smith, I have no idea.
Well, she doesn't stand for anything.
Well, perhaps.
She doesn't even have a she doesn't have a web page that has fully thought out policy proposals.
And
nothing.
So that's the thing.
This is what she has: smear attacks, smear campaigns. That's what Christy Smith has. Congratulations.
So this is an incredibly important primary, and by no means a slam dunk win for any Democrat who ends up getting it. This is a purple district. The Democratic candidate that you get is very important. And the idea that you would write thousands of words and never mention substantive information about what the stakes of the election are, what it means to choose one candidate over another, what their actual agenda is. Cenk has said a lot of controversial things, a lot of offensive things over the years, but he's also said more about his political ideology than literally anyone else in the country. If you wanted to know what he thought about reproductive rights, trade policy, foreign policy, you have more on the books to quote from than anything. Pete Buttigieg, every video of him speaking before 2 years ago goes viral because there's like 3 of them. We know almost nothing. With Cenk, we know almost everything, but no interest. Jake Tapper's not gonna have him on to say, you know what, I wanna talk about this controversial stuff, but also, what do you think about Medicare for all? That's a really important policy. What do you think about climate change? Seems kind of important. They're treating this entire election as if it is just about taking down Cenk. Christy Smith never has to say a thing about her agenda. She can just sort of coast by, probably, if that's gonna be your campaign strategy, lose next November to the Republican. It's so much more important than that. You're the New York Times, you're the Washington Post, you're the LA Times. You have resources and expertise and training, and you can't say anything about what these people would actually do? Why do we think that so many voters have no clue what's going on in this country?
Right.
To put all of this focus onto a race and teach nothing except about the controversy, which we were always gonna get, nobody's surprised about that. But do that and then put something about so many issues that are so important to hundreds of millions of Americans.
They don't care. And again, if the media were really supposed to fulfill the obligations and the responsibilities of true journalists, true journalism, right? Then they wouldn't be so hyper-focused on these attacks. I mean, again, they're serving as an extension of political campaigns, really. And that's the part that's been heartbreaking for me personally. Now, of course, there's the personal aspect of it with Cenk. But you guys, I wanted to be in media. I wanted to work in media since I was a kid. And I just believed things about journalism that aren't true at all. And that's a difficult thing to take in. Because look, again, we've criticized mainstream press, but I always thought that when these mistakes were made, that they were mistakes, that it was because of incompetence. It was because there wasn't actually ill intent. Come on, guys, journalism's important. There isn't bad intent, especially with places like the New York Times. Like, yes, people are like, oh, you didn't know? I mean, come on, look what happened with the war in Iraq. Yes, I know about those mistakes, believe me. But I just didn't want to believe or buy into this idea that the journalists that write for the Times are bad people and that they're doing this maliciously or intentionally. And I was wrong, and it's a difficult thing to take in.
Yeah. Well, at least in this one case, it would be very easy for this particular writer or the editor in charge of it or whatever to fix this. Issue a correction. Don't just take it out of your article. Issue a correction saying, whether by malice or laziness, we gave an incredibly false impression of something that we reported on. We apologize for that, and we aim to do better in the future. Easiest thing in the world. You would expect it from any outlet.
Unless we can't independently verify things that have been reported by the New York Times, we will no longer use the New York Times as a source for any of our coverage, period. at least on the main show. I can't talk for the rest of the network. I can't trust them. And so while they might think that their job isn't serious and that they can just play games and patty cakes with politicians, I take this job seriously, and I actually care about making sure we get you guys the truth. Earlier on today's show, we talked about how the New York Times had published a flat out lie about Cenk Uygur. He's running for California's 25th district. In a story published by Jennifer Medina at the New York Times, it was alleged that during an interview with David Duke, Cenk agreed that David Duke is not racist. Now, if you go back and you watch that video, it's clear that Cenk was being sarcastic. And so after an outpour of backlash, lots of people who have been contacting the New York Times to get a correction on this, finally they did issue a correction that I want to read to you. An earlier version of this article referenced, an earlier version of this article referred imprecisely to a remark by Cenk Uygur, a radio host, we're not on the radio, running for Congress. When David Duke appeared on his show and denied being a racist, Mr. Uygur was sarcastic when he replied, "No, of course not." I mean, they can't even get their correction right. It's amazing, but at least they corrected the heart of the issue.
Am I being petty when I say that I think they know that he's not a radio host? But
you're not being petty, and I agree with you. I think they know that too.
Add one extra quote. He also referred to David Duke as the definition of an anti-Semite. Right. That seems like a significant thing to add, rather than, it was imprecise. I guess that's the best that we're gonna get. That's better than nothing.
Intentional and malicious, okay?
It's better than nothing.
Intentional and malicious, it's better than nothing, but I'm gonna repeat, intentional and malicious, okay? So that's what we're dealing with here, and it's disgusting. A few member comments, and then we'll move on. So in regard to the New York Times finally issuing a correction days later, Bernie Bros, something.
I don't know what it says, but I know what it says.
Okay, look at the power we have. The story aired like what, an hour ago, and they were already pressured into issuing a correction. So they called him a radio show host. Screw them. They know we have power and that they lost. So look, I want to celebrate, but there's just so many other inaccurate things out there that have already caused damage, you know, and it goes beyond, like I've said during the show, during that story, it goes beyond Cenk for me. It shows you what's really going on behind the scenes with media outlets that people trust, right? Again, it goes back to the malicious intent, and it's really depressing.
And when the correction itself has an error in it, we have to say something because, like it or not, the New York Times is a very popular blog or podcast or whatever. We're not on the radio, okay? It's the internet. You have a website, New York Times. I don't know where I'm looking. You're on the internet too. We're sharing this thing.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.